Hello family, welcome to Stories with JAYVIL. Please subscribe and leave a like for us. It means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones and remember to turn on the post notifications so you don't miss any future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Now sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The village of Anicho, once brimming with life and laughter, now lay shrouded in an eerie silence. The mornings, usually alive with the sound of women pounding yams and children chasing chickens, were now punctuated by whispers of grief and fear. Another young woman had been found dead. This time it was Ijeoma. Ijeoma was the jewel of Anicho, known for her infectious laughter and kindness that seemed to brighten the darkest days. But her light had been extinguished too soon. Her body was discovered just before dawn, lifeless on her mat, her lips pale, her skin cold, and twin puncture marks on her neck. It was the same mark found on the other victims, tiny wounds that seemed too precise to be the work of a wild animal. The villagers whispered of curses, spirits, and unseen evils. How could someone so full of life be gone in an instant? The elders convened under the great Iroko tree, their faces heavy with worry. They spoke in low tones, their words a blend of superstition and desperation. "It is the spirits," said Elder Ugo, his deep voice trembling. "We have angered the gods, and now they take our daughters." Others nodded in agreement, but a few shook their heads in frustration. The explanations felt hollow, a way to make sense of something senseless. The chief of the village, a stoic man named Ezenwa, finally raised his hand for silence. "We must find the cause," he said firmly. "We cannot let this continue." As the elders debated, the women of the village wept openly. Mothers clutched their daughters tightly, whispering prayers of protection. Fathers sharpened their machetes and patrolled the village at night, but their efforts seemed futile. Whatever force was claiming the lives of their daughters was invisible, unstoppable. In the midst of this chaos was Emeka, the village craftsman. His chiseled features and easy smile seemed out of place in the grim atmosphere, yet he moved among the people like a comforting presence. He helped build coffins for the dead, offered his condolences to grieving families, and charmed the elders with his soothing words. "We must stay united," he would say, his voice like honey. "Fear will only divide us," the villagers admired Emeka. To many he was the embodiment of hope, a man who brought strength and reassurance when they needed it most. But not everyone was convinced. A few had noticed the strange pattern. Every woman who had fallen victim to the mysterious curse had, at some point, been courted by Emeka. Yet no one dared voice their suspicions aloud. How could such a kind and helpful man be involved in something so sinister? As night fell over Aniko, the fear deepened. The people locked their doors, prayed to the gods, and waited for the dawn. But in the shadows unseen by all, danger lurked, and Emeka, with his ever-present smile, carried a secret darker than anyone could imagine. The sun hung low over the hills of Oturu as Ndidi packed her belongings into a small woven bag. Word of her best friend Ijeoma's death had reached her the day before, and the news had struck her like a lightning bolt. Ijeoma, who had been so full of life, was now gone, her vibrant laughter silenced forever. The thought was unbearable. Ndidi couldn't shake the unease creeping through her. The strange deaths in Anicho had been whispered about even in Oturu, but hearing that her closest friend had fallen victim made the rumors hit differently. "This isn't just a curse," she murmured to herself as she tied her bag shut. "There has to be more to this." Her mother, a stout and practical woman, tried to dissuade her from making the journey. "Ndidi, let the dead rest. What good will it do to travel to Aniko now?" she asked, worry etched on her face. But Ndidi was resolute. "I can't sit here and do nothing," she replied. "I have to see her one last time, and I need answers." By mid-morning, Ndidi was on the narrow path leading to Anicho, her heart heavy but her resolve unshaken. The journey took hours, and as she walked, she replayed memories of Ijeoma in her mind, how they used to braid each other's hair under the mango tree, how they would laugh until their sides ached. The idea of never hearing her friend's voice again was too much to bear. When Ndidi finally arrived in Aniko, the air felt thick with tension. The usual hum of daily activity was subdued, and the villagers seemed wary, their eyes darting nervously toward the shadows. As Ndidi passed by, a few heads turned and she caught snippets of hushed conversations. She's the one from Oturu, her friend died. Another death, just like the others. It's a curse, I tell you. The gods are angry. Ignoring the whispers, Ndidi made her way to Ijioma's family compound, where she was met with sorrowful embraces and quiet tears. Ijioma's mother, her face etched with grief, clung to Ndidi like a lifeline. She was all I had left, the woman sobbed. Why did this happen? Ndidi stayed silent, her heart breaking, but her mind was already racing. The strange deaths, the puncture marks, the lack of answers, it all felt too deliberate. As she paid her respects to Ijeoma, her gaze wandered to the other villagers gathered around. That's when she noticed him. Emeka stood near the edge of the crowd, his posture relaxed, his expression sympathetic. He was speaking to a group of young men, his words measured and calm. Even in the midst of mourning, he managed to draw people to him like moths to a flame. Something about him set Ndidi on edge. She couldn't put her finger on it, but there was something too perfect about the way he moved, the way he spoke. She watched him closely, noting how the women seemed almost entranced by his presence, their grief momentarily forgotten. After the burial, as the crowd began to disperse, Ndidi approached a group of villagers seated under a tree. She asked them about the recent deaths, hoping to piece together a clearer picture of what was happening. It's the work of the spirits, one woman said with a shiver. We've angered them somehow. But why only young women? Ndidi pressed. And why does it keep happening? The villagers exchanged uneasy glances. Finally, an older man leaned closer and whispered, all the women who've died. They were seen with Emeka before their deaths. Ndidi's heart skipped a beat. She glanced across the compound, where Emeka was now helping some elders carry benches. He laughed at something one of them said, his smile disarming and bright. But to Ndidi, it no longer seemed genuine. It felt like a mask. She stood, her jaw tightening. This isn't a curse, she murmured under her breath. There's something else at play here. As night fell over Anicho, Ndidi's suspicion grew. She vowed to uncover the truth, no matter how dangerous it might be. For Ijioma's sake, and for the sake of every other woman in the village, she would get to the bottom of it. The morning sun rose sluggishly over Anicho, casting long shadows that seemed to mirror the unease lingering in the village. Life went on in cautious whispers and wary glances, but one man remained unaffected by the fear that gripped the people, Emeka, the village craftsman. To the untrained eye, Emeka was everything a man should be. His shoulders were broad, his smile radiant, and his voice carried a calm assurance that put others at ease. He had built many of the village's homes and carved beautiful figurines for the elders. Women adored him and men respected him. But beneath his charm lay a secret that no one could have imagined. Emeka's day began as it always did. He strolled through the marketplace, exchanging pleasantries with the traders. Good morning, Mama Nkichi, he said, flashing a grin that made the older woman blush. He purchased a few yams, joking with the vendor about his future wife and causing the nearby women to giggle. But as Emeka moved through the market, Ndidi was watching. She kept her distance, careful not to draw his attention, but her eyes missed nothing. She noticed how effortlessly he commanded attention, how people seemed to lean toward him as he spoke. He's too perfect, she thought, her suspicion growing. Nobody is that flawless. As the day progressed, Ndidi followed Emeka discreetly. She watched him work in his small workshop, where he carved intricate patterns into wooden stools and repaired broken farming tools. A young woman, Amaka, approached him with a shy smile holding a broken jewelry box. Emeka, can you fix this for me? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Of course, Emeka replied, his tone warm and inviting. For you, Amaka, anything. Ndidi noticed the way Amaka's face lit up and the subtle blush that spread across her cheeks. Emeka worked quickly, his hands deft and skilled, and when he handed the repaired box back to Amaka, he held her gaze just a little too long. Thank you, Amaka murmured, clutching the box to her chest as she walked away, her steps light and hurried. Ndidi's jaw tightened. It was a pattern she'd seen before. Emeka's charm was not just natural, it was calculated. He drew women in like a spider spinning its web, and Amaka was clearly his next target. As the sun dipped low, Emeka returned to his modest home on the edge of the village. The house was unremarkable, but it held a dark secret. Inside, hidden beneath a loose floorboard, was the reason for the mysterious deaths in Anicho, a cobra sleek and deadly, coiled in a corner. Its scales gleamed like polished ebony, and its eyes glowed with a malevolent intelligence. Emeka knelt before the creature, his tone reverent. "Another one is ready," he whispered. "Amaka will come to me soon," the cobra hissed, its forked tongue flicking out as if in acknowledgement. Years ago, Emeka had made a deal with a spirit from the depths of the forest. In exchange for unparalleled charm and success, he had agreed to serve the spirit's will. The cobra was the physical manifestation of the curse, bound to him and acting as his weapon. Every woman it claimed fed the spirit's hunger and strengthened Emeka's allure. But the deal had taken its toll. Emeka's nights were restless, haunted by shadows and whispers. He was a prisoner to his own charm, unable to stop the cycle of seduction and death. And yet he could not turn away from the power it gave him. Outside, Ndidi lingered in the shadows. She had followed him to his home, her curiosity outweighing her fear. She didn't know what she expected to find, but something about Emeka felt off, as if his warmth was a facade hiding something far darker. From her vantage point, she couldn't see the cobra or hear his whispers, but she could sense the unease in the air. "What are you hiding, Emeka?" she muttered to herself. As she crept away into the night, a plan began to form in her mind. If Emeka was involved in the deaths, she would find out. And if he was the cause, she would make sure he could never hurt anyone again. For now, Emeka remained the charmer of Aniko, the man everyone trusted. But Ndidi's resolve was growing, and she knew it was only a matter of time before his perfect mask cracked. The days in Aniko dragged on, heavy with tension. Though the villagers resumed their routines, the air remained thick with fear. The young women of the village no longer walked alone, and their parents cast suspicious glances at every shadow. Despite the precautions, the deaths loomed like a storm cloud, leaving everyone on edge. But Ndidi could not sit idle. Every time she thought of Ajioma's lifeless body, her heart clenched with sorrow and anger. Her friend had been vibrant, full of life, and now she was gone. The questions gnawed at Ndidi's mind. Why did all the victims bear the same puncture marks? Why were only young women targeted? And why was it that every one of them had some connection to Emeka? That morning, Ndidi decided to dig deeper. She started with the families of the victims, weaving her way through the village under the guise of offering condolences. As she spoke with grieving mothers and heartbroken sisters, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. Every single one of the victims had, at some point, caught Emeka's attention. "She was so excited when he spoke to her," said Mama Chinyere, whose daughter had been one of the first victims. "He even made her a carved bracelet. She thought it was a sign they would marry." Another woman, Aunt Ogechi, sighed heavily as she spoke of her niece. "She told me Emeka invited her to walk with him one evening. That was the last time I saw her alive." Ndidi's suspicions grew sharper. It was clear that Emeka wasn't just charming, he had deliberately sought out each of these women. But the question remained, why? What was he doing that led to their deaths? As the sun reached its zenith, Ndidi found herself walking toward Amaka, the young woman she had seen speaking with Emeka at the market. Amaka was sitting by the stream, washing clothes, her face glowing with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. "Good afternoon, Amaka," Ndidi greeted, sitting beside her. Amaka smiled shyly. "Good afternoon, Ndidi. You're Ijioma's friend, aren't you?" "Yes," Ndidi replied, a pang of sadness in her voice. "I wanted to ask you something. I noticed you were talking to Emeka yesterday." Amaka's blush deepened and she averted her eyes. "He's so kind," she said softly. "He fixed my jewelry box and gave me this." She held out her wrist to reveal a beautifully carved wooden bracelet. Ndidi's stomach churned. The bracelet was eerily similar to the one Mama Chinyere had described. "Be careful, Amaka," she said, her tone firm. "Sometimes people are not what they seem." Amaka frowned. "What do you mean?" "Emeka is a good man, everyone says so." Ndidi didn't push further. She knew Amaka wouldn't believe her, not yet. But she couldn't shake the feeling that Amaka was already caught in Emeka's web. That evening, Ndidi kept her distance, but followed Emeka again. First steps light and deliberate. She watched as he moved through the village, greeting people and sharing laughs. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, his demeanor shifted. He left the main path and headed toward the outskirts of the village, his movements purposeful. Ndidi trailed him silently, her heart pounding in her chest. He stopped at a small clearing near the forest's edge, a place shrouded in shadows. There, Emeka knelt on the ground, his back to her, his hands moving rhythmically. Ndidi couldn't see what he was doing, but she heard faint hisses like a snake's warning. Her blood ran cold. Emeka rose moments later, brushing dirt from his hands, and made his way back to the village. Ndidi stayed hidden until she was certain he was gone, then crept into the clearing. The ground where he had knelt was disturbed, as though something had been buried there. She felt a chill run down her spine as her mind raced. What was he hiding? What connection did this have to the deaths? By the time Ndidi returned to her lodging, the village was dark, and her thoughts were a storm of suspicion and fear. She knew Emeka was at the center of everything, but without proof, she could do nothing. Worse, the more she uncovered, the more dangerous it felt to continue. Yet Ndidi's resolve only grew stronger. She would not let Ijioma's death be in vain. She needed answers, and she needed them quickly. Tomorrow, she decided she would seek out the oracle of Nwanyoma. If there was anyone who could help her unravel the truth, it was the powerful seer who lived deep in the caves of Agbada Hills. As she lay awake that night, her mind filled with questions, one thing became clear. Whatever Emeka was hiding, it was far more sinister than she had imagined. The morning sky was painted with hues of gold and crimson as Ndidi prepared for her journey to the caves of Agbada Hills, the dwelling place of the revered oracle, Nwanyoma. It was said that the oracle had knowledge beyond the mortal plane, a gift bestowed by the gods themselves. If anyone could help uncover the mystery of the deaths in Aniko, it would be her. Ndidi packed lightly, a gourd of water, a small pouch of groundnuts, and a knife for protection. The villagers watched her with a mixture of curiosity and unease as she set off. Some whispered among themselves, warning that the path to Nwanyoma's cave was fraught with danger. But Ndidi paid them no mind. She had made her decision, and nothing would deter her. The journey began with a narrow path that wound through the village farmlands. The cries of birds and the rustling of leaves filled the air, but the deeper Ndidi ventured into the forest, the quieter it became. Even the wind seemed to avoid the path she walked. The trees grew taller and denser, their gnarled roots snaking across the ground like warnings to turn back. After an hour of walking, Ndidi reached the foot of Agbada Hills. The ascent was steep and the rocks were sharp underfoot. She gripped the vines and sturdy branches to pull herself upward, her breaths coming in short gasps. Sweat trickled down her back, but she pushed forward, fueled by the memory of Ijioma's laughter and the promise she had made to uncover the truth. Halfway up the hill she heard it, a faint eerie sound that made the hair on her arms stand on end. It was a whisper, soft and indistinct but persistent. Ndidi froze, her heart pounding. The stories she had heard about the spirits guarding the oracle's home flooded her mind. They were said to test the resolve of those seeking Nwanyoma's counsel, preying on fear and doubt. "Stay focused," she muttered to herself, gripping the knife tightly. "You've come too far to turn back." The whispers grew louder as she climbed, but Ndidi refused to be swayed. She sang quietly under her breath, a childhood song her mother had taught her to ward off evil spirits. The melody calmed her nerves and drowned out the whispers. By the time Ndidi reached the entrance to Nwanyoma's cave, the sun was high in the sky. The cave mouth was wide and dark, framed by jagged rocks that looked like the jaws of a great beast. A faint glow emanated from within, casting long flickering shadows on the ground. "Enter, child," came a voice, low and resonant. Ndidi's breath hitched. She hadn't even stepped inside, yet the oracle seemed to know she was there. Swallowing her fear, Ndidi stepped into the cave. The air was cool and damp, and the walls were adorned with ancient symbols that seemed to shimmer as she passed. At the center of the cave sat Nwanyoma, a woman of indeterminate age. Her silver hair flowed over her shoulders, and her eyes, though cloudy with age, radiated an otherworldly power. "You seek answers," the oracle said, her voice echoing through the chamber. "But answers come at a price. Are you prepared to face the truth?" Ndidi knelt before her, bowing her head. "I am." Nwanyoma reached out, her fingers tracing the air as though reading an invisible script. "There is a darkness in Aniko," she said. "It wears the face of a man, but its heart belongs to a beast. The cobra that strikes in the night is no ordinary snake. It is bound to him by a curse." Ndidi's heart raced. "Emeka," she whispered. The oracle nodded. "His charm is his weapon, his smile his bait. He lures women with promises of love, only to offer them as sacrifices to the spirit that sustains his power." "Why?" Ndidi asked, her voice trembling with anger. "Why would he do this?" "To gain what his heart desires most," Nwanyoma replied. "Power, influence, but his time is running out. The spirit grows impatient and he must claim another victim soon. If you do not stop him, your friend Amaka will be next." Ndidi's hands clenched into fists. "Tell me how to stop him." Nwanyoma extended her hand, and a small, intricately carved flute appeared in her palm. "This flute is imbued with the power to command the cobra," she said. "Play it when the beast reveals itself, and it will obey your will. But be warned, the spirit will not surrender its servant easily. You must be strong and unwavering." Taking the flute, Ndidi felt its weight in her hand, both literal and symbolic. "I will not fail," she said, determination burning in her eyes. Nwanyoma smiled faintly. "Go, child. The fate of Aniko rests in your hands." As Ndidi descended Agbada Hills, the weight of the oracle's words pressed heavily on her shoulders. The truth was darker than she had imagined, but she felt a spark of hope. With the flute in hand and the knowledge she now possessed, she was no longer helpless. She would confront Emeka, expose his darkness, and put an end to the deaths. The journey back to Aniko seemed shorter, her steps driven by purpose. As the village came into view, Ndidi clutched the flute tightly. The battle ahead would be dangerous, but she was ready. For Ijeoma, for Amaka, for every life lost to the cobra's fangs. Ndidi returned to Aniko with the weight of her mission pressing heavily on her shoulders. The flute from Nwanyoma felt alive in her hands, its intricate carvings a reminder of the power it held and the responsibility that came with it. She knew what she had to do: confront Emeka and use his own dark secret against him. But first, she needed to act cautiously. Emeka was no ordinary man, and his charm was a weapon as dangerous as the cobra that lurked beneath his clothes. She had to play the part of an unwitting admirer, weaving herself into his web without him suspecting her true intentions. The next morning, Ndidi found Amaka at the marketplace, humming a soft tune as she examined fabrics. Her wrist still bore the carved bracelet Emeka had given her, a token Ndidi now knew to be part of his deadly ritual. "Amaka," Ndidi said, forcing a smile, "are you free later? I'd like to visit the stream with you." Amaka looked up, her expression warm. "I'd love that, but I promised Emeka I'd meet him this evening." Her voice carried a note of pride, as if she had won the attention of the most sought-after man in the village. Ndidi's stomach churned. She needed to act fast. "Be careful, Amaka," she said, lowering her voice. "Sometimes the sweetest fruits hide the deadliest poison." Amaka frowned. "Why do you say that?" Ndidi hesitated. She couldn't reveal too much yet. "Just trust your instincts. If something doesn't feel right, walk away." Amaka nodded slowly, though Ndidi could tell her warning hadn't fully sunk in. Time was running out. Later that day, Ndidi approached Emeka. He was at his workshop, carving a stool with the ease of someone who had mastered his craft. When he saw her, his smile broadened, his eyes glinting with intrigue. "Ndidi," he said smoothly, setting his tools aside. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" She hesitated for only a moment before stepping closer. "I wanted to thank you for being so kind to Ijeoma's family," she said, her voice carefully measured. "It means a lot." Emeka's expression softened, and he gestured for her to sit. "It's the least I could do," he said. "Aniko is my home, and I care for its people." His charm was almost palpable, but Ndidi forced herself to focus. "I've heard you're quite the craftsman," she said, letting a hint of admiration creep into her tone. "Perhaps you could make something for me?" "For you," Emeka leaned forward, his smile turning playful. "Anything. What would you like?" "A bracelet," she said. "Something simple yet beautiful." Emeka's eyes gleamed. "Consider it done." That evening, as the village settled into the quiet rhythm of twilight, Ndidi waited near the Esh forest, the spot where Emeka often lured his victims. She had played her part well, ensuring Emeka saw her as yet another woman enchanted by his charm. Now she just needed him to take the bait. When he arrived, his smile was as disarming as ever. "You came," he said, his voice low and inviting. "I wanted to thank you for the bracelet," Ndidi replied, her voice steady despite the rapid beating of her heart. "You've been so kind." Emeka stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "Kindness is nothing compared to what you deserve, Ndidi." As he reached out to touch her hand, Ndidi braced herself. She could feel the tension in the air, the subtle shift in his demeanor. This was the moment he usually revealed his true self, the cobra waiting to strike. Then it happened. From beneath his wrapper, the cobra slithered out, its sleek body shimmering in the moonlight. Its eyes glowed with a menacing intelligence, and its fangs were bared, ready to claim another victim. But Ndidi was ready. Before the cobra could strike, Ndidi raised the flute and began to play. The melody was haunting, its notes weaving through the air like a spell. The cobra froze mid-slither, its head swaying in rhythm with the music. Emeka's confident smile vanished, replaced by a look of pure terror. What are you doing?" he demanded, stepping back. "Stop!" Ndidi's playing intensified, her fingers moving with precision over the carved holes of the flute. The cobra, now fully under her control, turned its gaze on Emeka, its master. It hissed, the sound sharp and threatening, and began to advance toward him. "No," Emeka cried, his voice breaking. "You don't understand." But Ndidi didn't stop. The cobra struck, its fangs sinking into Emeka's flesh. He let out a strangled cry, collapsing to the ground as the venom coursed through his veins. The cobra coiled around him, its body tightening like a noose until his struggles ceased. As silence fell over the clearing, Ndidi lowered the flute, her hands trembling. The cobra slithered away into the darkness, its task complete. Ndidi stood over Emeka's lifeless body, her mind racing. She had done what needed to be done, but the weight of the moment was almost too much to bear. She took a deep breath, steeling herself. The village needed to know the truth. Tomorrow, she would return to Aniko and reveal everything. For now she whispered a quiet prayer for Ijeoma and the other women whose lives had been stolen by the darkness that had worn Emeka's face. With the flute in hand, Ndidi turned and walked back toward the village, the night sky above her glittering with stars, a symbol, perhaps, of the light that could finally return to Aniko. As dawn broke over Aniko, a restless buzz spread through the village. By the time the sun bathed the rooftops in golden light, word had spread that Ndidi had returned from the forest carrying news about the mysterious deaths that had plagued the community. Villagers gathered under the great Iroko tree, their faces a mixture of curiosity, fear, and anticipation. Ndidi stood at the center of the gathering, the magical flute in her hands. Her face was pale but resolute, her voice steady as she addressed the crowd. "I know the truth about the deaths of our daughters and sisters," she began. "It was not a curse from the gods, nor the work of wandering spirits. The evil was among us, hiding behind charm and deceit." The villagers exchanged uneasy glances, murmuring among themselves. The elders leaned forward, their expressions stern. Elder Ugo, the oldest of the group, raised a hand to silence the crowd. "Speak clearly, child," he said. "What do you mean?" Taking a deep breath, Ndidi began to recount everything she had discovered. She spoke of Emeka's pattern of luring young women, the strange behavior she had witnessed, and the chilling confrontation in the H forest. She described the cobra, the cursed creature tied to Emeka, and how it had been responsible for the deaths. Gasps rippled through the crowd as she explained how she had used the flute to command the serpent and turn it against its master. "He made a pact with a dark spirit," Ndidi concluded, her voice rising with conviction. "He sacrificed the lives of our women to feed his own power and charm. But his evil ends here. Emeka is gone, and the curse has been broken." The silence that followed was heavy, punctuated only by the rustling of leaves in the breeze. Many villagers stared at Ndidi in shock, their disbelief evident. "Emeka," a young man finally said, his voice trembling. "How could it be him? He was so kind, so helpful." Others began to murmur their agreement, but Ndidi cut them off. "That's how he hid his darkness," she said firmly. "He used his charm to disarm us, to make us trust him. But I saw the truth with my own eyes." A woman in the crowd burst into tears. "My daughter, she always said Emeka was kind to her," she sobbed. "And now she's gone." the murmurs turned to cries of anger and grief. Some cursed Emeka's name, while others wept openly for the lives lost. The elders huddled together, speaking in low tones before Elder Ugo stepped forward. "You have done a great service to this village, Ndidi," he said solemnly. "You have uncovered the darkness that we failed to see. Your courage has saved lives, and for that, we are forever in your debt." The crowd murmured their agreement, and some began to approach Ndidi, offering their thanks and blessings. But Ndidi's heart remained heavy. While the threat was gone, the pain of the losses lingered, and she knew it would take time for the village to heal. The villagers organized a cleansing ceremony that evening, led by the elders and spiritual leaders. They burned effigies of Emeka to symbolize the purging of his evil, and offered prayers to the gods for protection and guidance. The people sang songs of hope, their voices rising into the night sky, a stark contrast to the fear that had gripped them for so long. Ndidi stayed on the outskirts of the gathering, her mind racing with thoughts of Ijeoma and the other victims. She felt a hand on her shoulder and turned to see Amaka, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," Amaka whispered. "You saved me. I didn't see it before, but now I understand. He almost got me." Ndidi embraced her tightly, feeling a flicker of relief. If nothing else, she had prevented another life from being lost. As the flames of the cleansing fire crackled and the songs of the villagers filled the air, Ndidi made a silent vow. She would carry this story with her, ensuring that others learned from the tragedy that had unfolded in Aniko. The lesson was clear: not all danger comes in obvious forms, and even the most charming smiles can hide the darkest secrets. Though her heart was heavy, Ndidi found strength in the knowledge that she had fulfilled her promise to Ijeoma. Her friend's death, though tragic, had not been in vain. Ndidi had uncovered the truth and stopped the cycle of death, giving Anicho the chance to heal and move forward. As the flames died down and the villagers returned to their homes, Ndidi looked up at the stars. "Rest now, Ijeoma," she whispered. "Your spirit is free." The night was calm, and for the first time in months, Anicho felt at peace. In the days following the revelation of Emeka's dark secret, the village of Anicho began to heal. But the scars left by the deaths of their daughters and sisters lingered. The truth about Emeka's crimes had shocked everyone to their core. A man they had admired and trusted had been the source of so much pain. The betrayal cut deep, and though his reign of terror was over, the grief in the air was palpable. Ndidi, now regarded as a heroine, found herself overwhelmed by the attention. Wherever she went, villagers stopped to thank her, to praise her bravery, or to share their own pain. Mothers wept at her feet, thanking her for avenging their daughters. Fathers clasped her shoulders and called her a savior. But despite the admiration, Ndidi felt hollow. She spent her days helping where she could, comforting grieving families, sharing meals with those who had lost loved ones, and listening to the villagers' stories. Yet at night the memories haunted her. The sight of the cobra, the fear in Emeka's eyes as his own weapon turned on him, the weight of the flute in her hands. It all replayed in her mind like a restless ghost. One afternoon, Amaka came to visit Ndidi, carrying a basket of freshly picked fruits. She sat beside her under the shade of a palm tree, her face soft with gratitude. "I don't know how to thank you," Amaka began, her voice quiet, but steady. "If it weren't for you, I might not be here." Ndidi forced a smile. "You don't owe me anything, Amaka. I just did what I had to do." "No," Amaka said, shaking her head. "You risked your life for us, you saw what none of us could, and you acted when we were too blind to see the truth. That takes courage." Ndidi looked away, her eyes clouded with emotion. "It wasn't just courage," she murmured. "It was anger, grief, and a promise. I couldn't let what happened to Ijeoma happen to anyone else." Amaka placed a hand on Ndidi's. "Because of you, it won't. You've given us a second chance." The villagers began to honor the women who had been lost to Emeka's evil. A memorial was built near the Esh forest, where stones were placed in a circle to symbolize their lives and spirits. Every evening, the villagers gathered to light candles and offer prayers, ensuring the memory of their loved ones would never fade. Ndidi often joined the gatherings, standing silently at the edge of the circle. She felt a deep connection to the women who had died, as though their spirits were watching over her. Yet she couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. Despite her victory, she hadn't been able to save them. One evening, the elders of Anicho visited Ndidi at her home. Elder Ugo, flanked by the other senior members of the village, stepped forward with a solemn expression. "Ndidi," he began, his voice carrying the weight of his years, "your courage and wisdom have saved this village. You saw what we could not and acted with bravery beyond your years. For that, we owe you a debt we can never fully repay." The elders presented her with a beautifully woven cloth, a symbol of honor and gratitude in Aniko. They also offered her a place in the council, a rare and prestigious position for someone so young. But Ndidi, though honored, declined. "I thank you for this gesture," she said humbly, "but my path lies elsewhere. I must carry this story beyond Anicho, to warn others of the dangers that can hide in plain sight." The elders nodded in understanding, their respect for her growing even deeper. "Then go with our blessings," Elder Ugo said, "and may the spirits guide your journey." Though she had found some solace in uncovering the truth and protecting the village, Ndidi knew her work was not done. The story of Emeka's deceit and the lives it had cost weighed heavily on her heart. She decided she would travel to neighboring villages, sharing the tale as a cautionary warning. She packed her belongings and the flute, now an emblem of her courage, and prepared for her departure. The villagers gathered to bid her farewell, their faces filled with gratitude and admiration. "You will always be a part of Aniko," one woman said, her voice breaking with emotion. "You gave us hope when we had none." Ndidi smiled faintly. "The strength to heal is within you all," she replied. "I just helped reveal it." As she left Anicho, walking the familiar path toward the unknown, Ndidi felt a sense of purpose. Her journey had only just begun, and she vowed to honor the memories of those who had been lost. She would ensure their stories were never forgotten, and that no one else would fall victim to the darkness disguised as charm. And so, with the flute in hand and determination in her heart, Ndidi took her first steps toward a new chapter, a chapter of healing, teaching, and resilience. Ndidi's departure from Anicho marked the beginning of a new journey, one filled with purpose. She traveled across villages, her voice carrying the story of Emeka's dark deeds and the lessons it held. The tale of the cobra that had lurked beneath the charming smile of a man became a warning for all who heard it. Her first stop was the neighboring village of Izama, where she was greeted with curiosity and caution. The villagers had heard whispers of the tragedy in Aniko, but the details had been shrouded in mystery. When Ndidi gathered them under the sprawling baobab tree, the entire village came to listen. Ndidi stood before the crowd, her voice steady and clear as she recounted the story of Aniko's plight. She described how Emeka had used his charm to lure his victims, how the cobra had been the weapon of his deceit, and how the darkness had claimed the lives of innocent women. "But darkness does not prevail where there is light," she said, raising the flute for all to see. This instrument, a gift from the oracle, became the weapon that ended his terror. It was not magic alone, but courage, determination, and the pursuit of truth that set Aniko free. The crowd listened in rapt silence, their faces a mix of awe and fear. When Ndidi finished, the village chief approached her, his expression grave. "You have brought us wisdom, Ndidi," he said. "Your story is a reminder that evil often hides in the most unexpected places. We must remain vigilant." Ndidi's story spread like wildfire, carried from one village to the next. Her tale inspired women to trust their instincts and question the motives of those who sought to charm them. Men too began to reflect on their actions, recognizing the harm that could come from deceit and manipulation. In some villages, the people erected shrines to honor the women who had been lost to Emeka's darkness. These shrines became places of reflection and learning, where elders told stories of courage and resilience. Ndidi's name became synonymous with bravery, and her actions were immortalized in songs and proverbs. Though Ndidi found solace in her mission, the memories of what she had endured in Aniko lingered. At night, when the villagers were quiet and the stars lit the sky, she would sit alone with the flute, tracing its carvings with her fingers. The faces of the women who had been lost haunted her dreams, their laughter and joy now only echoes in her mind. "Ajioma," she whispered one night, gazing at the stars. "I hope you see what your story has become. Your life, though taken too soon, has saved so many others." Her grief was a constant companion, but so too was her determination. She knew that the pain she carried was the price of the truth, a burden she willingly bore to honor those who could no longer speak for themselves. In the village of Obiakpa, Ndidi met Uzor, a young hunter who had heard of her journey and offered to guide her through the treacherous forest between villages. Uzor was quiet but observant, his sharp eyes missing nothing. Though Ndidi was wary of trusting strangers, Uzor's sincerity won her over. "Your story is important," Uzor said as they walked one afternoon. "It's not just about what happened in Aniko. It's about the strength we all have to face the darkness in our own lives." His words struck a chord with Ndidi. She realized that her mission was not just to tell the story of Aniko, but to inspire others to find their own courage in the face of adversity. As they approached the village of Nkume, Ndidi noticed an air of unease among the people. Whispers of strange occurrences filled the marketplace, and the villagers avoided meeting her gaze. When she inquired further, she learned that young women had been disappearing under mysterious circumstances. Her heart sank. Though the culprit here was unlikely to be another cursed Cobra, Ndidi knew the patterns of evil all too well. Deceit and manipulation took many forms, and darkness often found new ways to manifest. "Will you help us?" a young woman named Chinelo asked, her voice trembling. "We don't know who to trust," Ndidi nodded, gripping the flute tightly. "I will." In Kume, Ndidi's mission took on a new urgency. She began investigating the disappearances, speaking to families, and piecing together clues. Her experiences in Aniko had sharpened her instincts, and she used what she had learned to uncover the truth. The story of Emeka's Cobra had prepared her for the dangers of deception, but Ndidi realized that her journey was far from over. The world was full of hidden evils, and her role was to shine a light on them, no matter how dark the path ahead might be. As she stood at the edge of Nkume, the flute in one hand and Uzor at her side, Ndidi felt a surge of determination. She had faced darkness before and prevailed. Whatever awaited her in this new village, she would face it head-on. "Let's go," she said, stepping forward. "There's work to be done." Ndidi's arrival in Nkume marked the beginning of a new chapter in her journey. The village, shrouded in fear and uncertainty, reminded her of Anicho in its darkest days. Young women whispered of a shadowy figure that lurked at the edges of the village, while elders shook their heads, dismissing it as paranoia. But Ndidi, seasoned by her experience, knew better. Darkness had a way of hiding in plain sight. Over the next few days, Ndidi immersed herself in the life of Nkume, listening to the villagers' stories and observing their behavior. It didn't take long for her to notice patterns. Just as in Aniko, the young women who had gone missing had all been courted or approached by the same man, Okiki, a traveling trader who charmed his way into the village every few weeks. "Okiki is harmless," one elder told her dismissively. "He brings us goods we need, and he's always respectful." But Ndidi's instincts told her otherwise. She watched as Okiki mingled with the villagers, his easy smile and smooth words masking something sinister. She saw how the young women flocked to him, their trust a weapon he wielded without remorse. Ndidi knew she couldn't confront Okiki without proof. She decided to set a trap, enlisting the help of Chinelo, a brave young woman who had lost her sister to the disappearances. Together, they devised a plan to expose Okiki's true nature. At the next village gathering, Chinelo approached Okiki, feigning interest in his wares. She complimented his craftsmanship and laughed at his jokes, playing the part of a potential victim. Okiki, as expected, took the bait, inviting her to meet him near the forest that evening. From a hidden vantage point, Ndidi and Uzor watched as Okiki led Chinelo into the shadows. They followed at a distance, their footsteps muffled by the forest floor. When they reached the clearing, Ndidi's breath caught in her throat. There, Okiki revealed his true self, a man driven by greed and cruelty, preying on the vulnerable for his gain. Ndidi stepped out of the shadows, the flute in her hand. "Stop," she commanded, her voice ringing through the clearing. Okiki turned, his face twisting in anger and surprise. "Who are you?" he spat. "I'm someone who knows what you've done," Ndidi replied, her voice steady. "And I won't let you harm anyone else." Okiki lunged toward her, but Ndidi raised the flute to her lips. She played a sharp, commanding note, the sound reverberating through the forest like a battle cry. It wasn't magic this time, it was a symbol of her resolve, a reminder of the courage that had brought her this far. Uzo stepped forward, his spear raised, and together they subdued Okeki. The villagers, alerted by Chinelo's earlier whispers of the plan, arrived moments later to witness the confrontation. Okeki was taken back to Nkumi, where the elders held a council to decide his fate. The truth of his actions was laid bare, and the villagers, once blind to his manipulation, were united in their anger. Justice was swift, and the village began the process of healing. Ndidi stood on the outskirts of the gathering, watching as the people reclaimed their sense of safety. Chinelo approached her, gratitude shining in her eyes. "You've saved us," Chinelo said. "Just like you did for Anicho." Ndidi shook her head. "You saved yourselves. I only showed you the truth." As Ndidi prepared to leave Nkumi, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Her journey was not just about uncovering darkness, it was about empowering others to see it for themselves. Each village she visited, each story she told, added to the growing ripple of awareness and resilience. Uzo, who had become both a companion and a trusted ally, decided to join her on her travels. "There are more villages, more stories waiting to be told," he said. "Together, we can make a difference." Ndidi nodded, the flute secure in her hand. "Then let's continue." As they walked into the horizon, the sun casting long shadows behind them, Ndidi thought of Ijeoma and the women of Anicho. Their lives, though lost, had sparked a movement, a reminder that even in the face of darkness, courage and truth could prevail. The story of Ndidi and the Cobra became a legend, told across villages as a tale of resilience, justice, and the power of one person to ignite change. And as Ndidi carried the light of that story into new lands, she knew that her journey was far from over. The world was vast, and though the darkness remained, so too did the strength to overcome it. And so with each step, Ndidi became not just a heroine, but a symbol of hope, a beacon in a world that often needed reminding of its own strength. We've come to the end of this story. Please subscribe to my channel to support me. Thank you.